2, 3, 4.
Welcome to Don't Do That, the podcast where we talk about what not to do at work and beyond.
As equity practitioners, we found ourselves often thinking that folks should stop doing things before they start doing things. Hence the title of our podcast, Don't Do That. I'm Ani. I'm an equity coach, organizational equity strategist, and educator with a deep curiosity for how to improve systems and a commitment to lift others as I continue to learn and grow.
I'm Karen, and I've worked in social justice for over a decade. I'm a consultant, coach, and thought partner. My purpose is to make community matter. I do that by helping leaders create better work environments. Adi and I met as consultants and quickly became friends. Collectively, we have over 25 years of experience navigating equity, inclusion, and justice in the workplace. Don't Do That is a platform to tell stories about making mistakes at work and how to fix them. The views on this podcast are our own. We do not speak on behalf of our organizations or the communities we mention. Welcome, listeners. Today on Don't Do That, we are discussing leadership style. Like personal style, our leadership style is the unique flair we bring to the workplace. We should develop our leadership style throughout our careers instead of waiting for a specific title. Today, Ani and I will share our leadership style and who and what influenced us along the way. So let's get into this today, Ani. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I know, me too. I feel like I'm going to get to know you a little bit more than I already do.
Yes.
So before we jump into our discussion, let's start with our landscape as we normally do. So in doing some research on leadership style, I came across an article by Harvard Business School online, and it talks about tips on how to develop your personal leadership style. And the author, Emily Ostermeyer, says that self-awareness is essential to cultivating a leadership style, which I agree. And some of the notable tips that she mentions in the piece are: one, imitation is the enemy. Emily says that you should throw out your leadership archetype when you start imitating the style of your idol and develop your own leadership style from within and not from outside of yourself, which I found to be very interesting. The second tip was understand the influence of bias. So knowing that people will interpret your leadership style through their own biases. And for women in particular, research showed that women who demonstrate high competence can often be perceived as less approachable. And similarly, women leaders who shine with warmth and approachability may be seen as less competent. Catch 22.
The double bind.
Right. And I wonder how that intersects for women of color, especially. And then the third tip was around being brave. Emily says that confidence is critical to leadership, and you build your confidence through honest self-reflection. So be aware of people's impressions of you and acknowledge your own potential biases or perceptions and how they may be affecting your judgment of others. So I thought that this was a good foundation for us to dive into sharing more about our own personal journeys in developing our style as leaders. And so to start things off, would love to know, how do you describe your leadership style?
Yes. So I love this conversation. So I think we've talked about this on the pod before, but I will give the context of I spent many years in my career working in higher education, particularly in the student affairs space, which is a space where we are always talking about developing student leaders and what leadership looks like. There are so many sort of leadership pathways and assessments, Clifton Strengths. There's a program called Leader Shape, thinking about RA training, all of those things. So I love this conversation about what leadership looks like. And for me, I would describe my leadership style as intentional. And for me, intentional means like values driven. I would describe it as inclusive and empowering. And I can talk a little bit more about those words and why
Yeah.
I felt like that for me. So, one, when I think about being values driven, I think it's important for me as a leader to think about at the end of the day, I need to be able to look at myself and not only recognize myself, but I desire to feel proud of my actions.
Mhm.
So I always use it as a bit of a benchmark of like, do I feel good about the choices that I've been making? Are they true to who I am and the values that I hold? And for me, those values remain pretty consistent in my personal and professional life.
Okay.
And when I say inclusive, I genuinely mean that. Even when I think about hiring folks, I I try my best to think about who can sort of like add value in a unique way that is very different from my own. I try
Mhm.
not to sort of like only work with people who remind me of myself, but to sort of like broaden the, the pool to think about who is not currently at this table and how can we sort of like bring in that voice or lens. And then empowering, I'm definitely somebody who is about lifting as I climb. Um, I don't think I've had a job. I don't want to say ever, but it might be ever where I didn't put at least one friend on.
Yeah.
And
You are good
agency
about that.
is something that is like really important to me and without judgment, right? So like if someone is like, "Hey, I just want this job because it's a paycheck," cool, do your thing. If somebody's like, "Hey, this is going to be my foot in the door to the next thing," do your thing. It's like I really want other people to feel like they have agency over their own success and I'm not
Mhm.
leading them towards something that is like my preference or my desire.
Yeah.
What about you?
This is actually something I had to spend time thinking about because I was thinking both in terms of like how would I describe myself as a leader and also what is the feedback that I've gotten over the years
Hmm,
and are those things consistent or inconsistent with one another?
interesting. So first, I want to hear how you would describe yourself, and then if you feel like there's some inconsistencies.
Yeah. So I would describe myself as oddly enough warm,
Yes, warm.
which based on the data may not be working for me, but I'll stick with it nonetheless.
Yeah.
Um, but I would describe myself as warm and personable in the sense that I really do try to make connections with folks and bond from a place of like our shared humanity. And like to your point, recognize that everybody comes to their work or role with different motivations and different desires. And as a leader, I try to understand what those things are because my priority is to support you in getting there.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and then also understanding that like life will life for everyone at one point in time and having a great sense of empathy and understanding about those things. But I would also say I coupled that warm ness with clarity. So I try to be very clear about like what I need from my team, when I need it. Um, and then if you have trouble or need support completing that thing, then like offering and checking in about it
Yeah.
so that you don't feel like you're, off on your own. Because those are things that I feel like have been shown to me as I've like progressed in my career, and it's something that I also want to show to other people.
Mhm.
In terms of like the feedback piece, it's really interesting because I think obviously like performance reviews are one marker where you get feedback, but I also think when you change roles or change like jobs, that is another marker of feedback in terms of the kind of impact that you have on a
Mm.
place. And so I usually really do take those moments to heart in terms of thinking about did I make the impact that I wanted to here with the people that I work with on a regular basis. And for one role in particular, I was in that role and I was mostly remote. And when I got a chance to, when I got the opportunity to leave that role for another role, I was really heartened by the way that people like reached out to me just to share like the impact that I had on them.
Mm,
Because not that I was surprised by it, but it was not feedback that I had gotten in that while I was there. And so just to hear that like my intention was met and people thinking positively about my leadership style, I was like, okay, I'm doing what I set out to do, even if I don't get the constant like or regular feedback that would
sure.
tell me that I'm doing that. So
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
how I got my leadership
co-sign,
style.
friend feedback here. I agree that you are very warm, person, clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think I've mentioned that on the
And
pod before that you are definitely the friend that constantly offers me grace, but it doesn't feel like a position of um like weakness. It feels like a just grace, right? Sometimes it's like, okay, if someone is offering grace, it could feel like, oh, maybe this person is like a pushover or something like that. But even in our communications, you're always very like clear about, okay, we can reevaluate the deadline or the deliverable, but there's still an expectation there. So I think you balance that very well.
well, thank you, friend. I was also going to say, you mentioned that you are the leader that like supports people in their success, and I have definitely, not only for myself, but I've seen you do that with other people in your community time and time again. And I think that that is something that a lot of people aspire to, of like, I want to be the person to lift as I climb, but sometimes people don't really do that. It's like, even though it's something we aspire to, I think that less people do it than we think.
You know what is so interesting? So, I always tell, because I have worked with young people for a long time, like you practice leadership regardless of whatever role that you're in. And I think sometimes people believe that once they are in sort of like positional power, they can then affect change or do insert whatever. But
Hmm.
if you have not practiced that behavior, you will not do it then. You're not going to
Yeah.
develop that new skill when you have the most to lose or it feels super risky at that point. So for me, I think because I mean, even if I was like my first job at AMC movie theaters, like, regardless, everyone has like a sphere of influence, regardless of your
Yeah.
role. And maybe that influence or that sphere is smaller, but you have to sort of like practice those things because it's just going to feel like too much of a stretch if once you get to a positional um, power to then start to develop that.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Like, we are constantly developing our leadership style, even when we don't have the specific title to go along with it.
Mhm.
And I know that as I was preparing for this conversation, I started to think about like, what are the experiences that I've had that made me like want to model a certain leadership characteristic versus made me want to say, I'm not going to do that. Do that. So I would love to hear from you if you have experiences like that where it was something that you were like, yes, I'm gonna model this or at least incorporate it into my style versus it was like, nah, I'm gonna avoid that at all costs.
Yes. So when I think of like sort of the biggest influences and the like don't do that of like leadership, I think about again back to my undergrad years, working in the higher ed space. There was always this bias towards like the big personalities, like thinking about Clifton strengths. There's one strength that is called woo, which is like winning others over. And I remember like doing this like RA training or interview or something, and like most of the people in that interview were woo personalities, like big personalities, highly energetic, like love being center stage, kind of command the full room. And there was like sort of a bias towards that in leadership. And as I thought about like leaders, I had never seen someone in leadership who didn't always sort of like stand in front and command the room until I learned of Bayard Rustin. And I won't apply judgment to the why of his behaviors, right? Because, it's very complex, and there were reasons why he made choices based on his identity and what the world allowed, etc. So I'm not going to make a judgment on why he did that if there was like a particular intention there. But for me, understanding like quiet strength or
Mhm.
strategic thinking, behind the scenes influence
Yeah.
that can drive sort of like system change or lasting change was such a game changer for me, that I too could be a leader, even if it's not my personality type to be sort of like loud or like be like, come on, y'all, let's go this way. It was like, oh, there's a different type of leadership that I can sort of thrive in. So for me, that was a game changer.
I love it. And that behind the scenes gets underestimated because that's important. Like
It
the
is.
folks that are behind the scenes are often the folks running the show,
And
in different ways.
I just want to say, as like an anxiety girly, it just feels like a better, safer place for me. Like, not to say that I cannot be in front of the room. I think at this point in my career, I have developed skills to be able to do those things, but it's just not my heart's desire. And I think I do better, like, as the person helping the person who is leading the room. So, yeah, I just love that, it felt like, okay, there's another lane for me where I can
Yeah.
also be successful, and I can also look to, have a model for leadership in a different way.
Yeah. That wasn't based on what you were seeing at your own
Exactly.
workplace. Yeah. I was thinking about this too for myself, and I've had experiences with both in terms of having leaders model various characteristics in that I want to like incorporate and those that I don't. For one experience in particular, it was like my first job out of grad school, and oddly enough, when I got into the role, they were just about to transition from one executive director to another. But I got to work with the first executive director, the one that was transitioning out for like the first month or so of my when I started. And I remember being at work and we had like this like all staff meeting. And the way that the office was set up, it was kind of like in the front of the office in like a large conference rooms. And so you have to like set up tables and stuff beforehand so everyone had a place to sit. And so the meeting was over and the executive director actually started to like put away tables and chairs, even though that was like not obviously a part of her role at all. But it was such an example of like servant leadership to me that to me demonstrated like team over title.
Mm,
And I really appreciated the fact that she didn't feel like her title was such that she would never like help clean up after a meeting or, do something that other staff are expected to do.
mhm,
Um, and I just felt like it was such a good demonstration of like, I will never expect you to do something that I'm not willing to do as a leader.
mhm,
Um, and especially because I was mostly early in my career, it was an experience that has stayed with me since then. That I try to also be the person that puts like team over title, and like there's not necessarily I don't feel like there's a task or something that I won't do if it's for the sake of like helping the team succeed.
yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And that, honestly, I'm going to be honest, that challenges me a little bit, only because I sometimes think about just like other layers of identity. Like, as an example, like, women tend to be the ones who are doing those types of tasks. So, as a woman leader, do I want to be like modeling something like that? I don't know. But I think, I mean, generally, I agree with you that, yeah, it should be team over title. Um, and the manifestations, obviously you have to. figure out what works for you.
Yeah, for sure. When I was thinking the other direction of like what I wanted to avoid, the experiences that I've had center around leaders feeling or being inaccessible and unavailable, and being so stretched in terms of their capacity that it doesn't feel like they had a real interest in like my development and success. And so for me, that's why the like warmth and connection piece is so important, because I want my team members to know that I'm invested
Mm,
in their success. And I never want to be a leader that is so stretched or my capacity is so thin that my team members don't feel like I care or about their development, their growth, their success, and like all the things that are happening with them. So, because I've had experience where it's like, especially a leader gave me feedback over email. I requested like a meeting to talk about it and never got a response. And it was like, okay, this isn't like the type of, leadership that I want to display, because the message that I received is that you don't really care about how successful I am, especially when it comes to like being a part of this team.
yeah. For me, the don't do that of leadership is, is connected to like my own style of leadership, which is very like intentional. It's hard for me to, buy into leadership that feels unanchored. So,
Mm,
regardless of whether I agree with your choices or not, if I understand sort of like the why behind it, like what are the things that are important to you that you are unwavering on, even if it's something like, a commitment to response time or urgency in work. If I can understand the why behind it, I can get behind it or not, right? I can decide. I think I struggle with leadership that sort of like follows trends, or it's like, oh, this is, the new thing of the time, so we're going to be doing that, but then we're going to flip to do something else. Or you said last week this was the thing that we were doing, and then this week you're not doing it. So it,
just kidding.
I mean, it's so disrupting to my ecosystem.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a struggle for me. It's just like unanchored leadership. Again, even in my like coaching practice, I'm like, people can accept bad news if it's consistent, right? Like if you
Mhm.
set the expectation of like, hey, this is what it is and this is how it's going to be, cool. People can accept it. It's the like the gaslighting, the wishy-washy, the let's not do that. So,
Yeah. I'm like that too. I consider myself to be a very grounded person, and I do struggle with folks who are unanchored. You say that's a great way of putting it.
where are we? We're just all over. We're all over the river. I don't know where we are.
I love that. The other thing that I wanted to get your insights on too is we have heard, well, in my mention of the landscape, I talked about leadership being developed from within. And I think that is also coupled with the life experiences that we have. And so I was curious if like partnership or parenthood or other life experiences have shaped your leadership style.
Yes. Short answer, yes. The thing that comes to mind for me, which I think I knew before and maybe talked about before, but like it is so paramount for me now, is this idea over like process versus outcome. I think,
Mhm.
especially in parenthood, I
Okay.
think there is something about how, as a single person or person who's not, caretaking for others, or primarily just caretaking for self, um, you feel like you have a lot of control over outcome, right? I can say,
Yeah.
like, I can do these three things and I'm fairly certain it's going to lead me to this outcome. But in partnership and definitely in parenting, it's not that. It really is just about investing in the process. and the outcome is going to be what it's going to be, and you don't own that, right? And I think the same thing for like leadership. It's not to say to your team or employees or whomever you're leading, like obviously we want some benchmarks, right? But what we want to focus on is like, here are the best ways to work, and our outcomes can be limitless based on that, right? So if we're saying like, here's how we're going to prioritize learning and development, here's how we're going to prioritize skill building, here's how we're going to prioritize doing our best work, and then like the outcome, we're hoping for this, but it can truly be whatever. And I think for sure parenting for sure has taught me that. I mean, the kids really are their own humans. It's no, yeah. I mean, I knew this about people, right? Everyone's an individual, but I think maybe people think, or I definitely thought like, oh, there's definitely more control. They're just a baby. It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, there's less control for sure because they are a small one. They don't even know, like what it means to like follow a leader or anything like that. So
Yeah. That's so funny because I remember my therapist telling me, I forgot what we were talking about, but the lesson stuck with me, which was similar to what you described. She was saying that when her daughter was young and she would tell her like, put on your coat. And, if her daughter at the age of, 3 or 4 is exercising her own agency and not wanting to do that thing, it's like, I can yell and scream at you and like make you put on your coat. But if I don't feel good about the process of getting there, then like the outcome doesn't really matter. And so she had to like think more about
yeah,
the process and how to like support that agency
yeah,
instead of kind of like browbeating,
yeah.
her daughter into submission. So I think,
Exactly. Like the process of like how to make healthy choices, or like the why behind the coat. Like it's cold outside. You want to step outside with no coat? Okay, let's see how that goes. We're going to get like, it's the process of it, which it's easier to be outcome focused. To just be like,
yeah.
put on the coat and then we'll go.
Exactly. Exactly. I would say that for myself, partnership has positively influenced my leadership style in the sense of helping me around communication and like how to communicate effectively or find ways to communicate effectively with my partner, and thereby like applying that to the workplace, team members or colleagues or peers. Um, and understanding that my way of communicating isn't always right.
That'll do it.
So it has been a mirror that, while I don't want to look into it sometimes, it's been super helpful. And also just being a sounding board and like having someone that I can consistently raise things to and like help me process what I may be experiencing or like a challenge that I have. That I just want like an outside perspective on. So I think partnership has been helpful for me in that way. And not to say like I don't think that romantic partnership is required in terms of having those things. I
For
think
sure.
people can experience growth in communication and having a sounding board in a number of ways. But for myself, I've seen my partnership for sure help in those ways.
I love that. I mean, the group projects, the teamwork.
It's a constant group project, girl. Constant group project. And everybody has to pull their weight.
Yes. Shout out to my man. I'm just gonna say he's great. I have a lot to work on. So
Love it. Okay, well, let's move into our do that and don't do that segment as it relates to leadership style. So, I have a couple things that I'm interested to get your insight on, and I'm sure you have some things for me.
yeah.
So, I will start with my first do that or don't do that. So, knowing that most people have a growth trajectory in their career, do you think that folks should embrace imposter syndrome as they are growing in their career? Can it be helpful or harmful? Do that or don't do that?
I mean, I'm going to say don't do that because I would not call it imposter syndrome. I think the
Okay.
feeling of do I belong here is good information and a good gut check. Sometimes you get that feeling because you actually this is not a good place for you. And it's
Hmm.
not a you're an imposter, it's a the energy of this space does not align with who you are. So it's not necessarily connected to like the worthiness of it. The other thing about imposter syndrome, I think it sort of like minimizes discrimination in that. So it's
Say more.
if I am showing up to this place, like maybe I'm not imagining that I feel like an imposter. Maybe people are
Um,
deliberately making me feel like I am
mhm.
an imposter, or they're unable to see my potential in ways that they're able to see other people's potential. And we've had this conversation in the past too. There are many people who take jobs that they are 50% qualified for and never made to feel like an imposter. They're made to
Girl.
feel like they are someone who has potential, someone who can grow into the role,
Hmm.
someone who people are excited to see what they do versus I can come in 80% qualified and still be made to feel like, oh, I'm not 100% there, right? So
Yeah.
I say don't do that to imposter syndrome. Recognize the feeling for sure, but really unpack kind of what is happening.
Yeah. I like that a lot. My my answer was actually I do that for a different reason.
Oh, let's hear
In
it.
that, in that I've had an experience, especially my first like C-suite level position, where in starting that role, I felt like, am I ready for this?
Mm,
And a mentor of mine told me, like, essentially, you have to fake it until you make it and give your brain the opportunity to catch up to like where you are,
mm,
not because you're not qualified or you don't belong there, but that it just takes time to see yourself in those shoes. And so embrace it in the sense that accept that this is where you are in your career, know that you are worthy to be there, know that you belong there, know that you are qualified, and walk in that until you feel grounded in it. And
yeah.
so, yeah,
I mean, I love that too. I think it's a both and.
I agree.
Okay. My don't do that. You're going to love this.
Okay.
Do that or don't do that. Dressing for the job that you want.
Oh, girl, you know that's do that for me all day.
But you said do that?
Yes, absolutely. Do that for sure. I mean honestly, I think that leadership style and personal style go hand in hand with each other. And I think it's perfectly okay to dress for the life and career or role that you want. Because I think that it does two things. Like, one, I think it helps to build confidence internally, right? That you begin to see yourself in that position. And then other people can begin to see you in that space because it matches what you're already like displaying, and what already is radiating, hopefully from the inside out.
Mhm.
So, yes, I say put that shit on and dress
And do
for the role you want. Exactly.
yes, yes. I agree. I think sometimes when people say dress for the job you want, they mean look at the people who are currently in that role and dress like them. But when I hear you say that, you're saying, no, imagine the life and lifestyle that you want for yourself and dress that way.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Because like in the beginning, if imitation is the enemy, then we shouldn't also be imitating in our personal style either.
Agreed.
Okay. My do that or don't do that is show vulnerability as a leader. Meaning, should you display emotion, admit when you don't know something, take accountability for mistakes, do that or don't do that on vulnerability.
Yes, do that. Asterisks, do that strategically. I do
Okay.
not recommend being an oversharer if things are irrelevant to the workplace or make you feel particularly uncomfortable, then there's no need to share that. So I think there's levels to like the vulnerability or risk. And the other thing about that is you should also confidently share your strengths as a vulnerability as well. So I think oftentimes when we talk about like vulnerability, it's like, I have to be sort of like, sharing my flaws or weaknesses or giving people sort of like ammunition to attack me later. But I think a part of vulnerability is like being willing to also like just be honest about yourself. And a part of that honesty is like the places that you shine. So if I'm like, oh, I am not the person who stands in front of the room. Generally, I don't desire to be that person. I can say why, or I can just say, like, it's just not my personality type or whatever. And then also be honest about, and here are the ways that I can also strengthen a room without being in the front. I'm the person who can come up with like great, you know, learning and development. I'm the person who can come up with like a great program structure. I'm the person who can like moderate a great conversation or facilitate a great conversation. And I can add something to a room without being in front of it. So,
Mm,
what about
yeah,
you?
I would agree. I think do that with an asterisk. I do think that as a leader, there are challenges and experiences that you will have to manage and navigate. And sometimes it requires that you find a space to do that that's not in front of your team or staff so that you can come to your team or staff with what the action is or like what the next step is. But I think that coupled with that, it is also okay to show the process to the point we made earlier of like how you got there. Um, and in terms of like admitting when you don't know something, I'm off for that. I mean, as as long as it's not a consistent like I don't know, then it's like okay, well wait a minute, wait a minute now.
Now we're unanchored.
Right,
Floating
exactly.
down the river again.
But I'm thinking about like the pandemic, for example, right? Like that was a time of uncertainty for everyone. So it was difficult to have answers at all times. So I think there is a level where it's appropriate to admit when you don't know something. But I think coupled with that, you should let folks know how you're going to, right, address it or get the answers that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. We're aligned. Um, okay. Adjacent question here for my do that or don't do that. As a leader, and imagine yourself leading a team or organization, should you yourself hold space for your team? So if something is happening in the world, or if there's a issue or conflict on your team, should you be holding space for folks?
Oh, this is a good one. I would say it depends. So it could be both a do that or don't do that. I think you have to be aware of the dynamic that you bring to the group and how that dynamic shifts when you're present. Because naturally, folks will filter themselves when leaders are present. And so I think that if it's more helpful for your team to process in a space that you're not in, then I think that you can give, the introductory remarks saying why something is important, but then provide the tools or support for folks to have that conversation without you being present.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm more on the don't do that side, actually,
Okay.
for similar reasons. In that, one, I firmly believe that only people who are technically, skill wise, expertise wise qualified to hold space should do that. So if you do not have that sort of skill, um, there are dialogical tools that you should be using. A lot of people who have like counseling backgrounds feel like the right folks to be doing that. So if you don't have those skills, you should not do that. I think sometimes when people say things like holding space, they literally just mean like, I'm going to bring people together and ask an open ended question, which to me is like so harmful,
Yeah.
especially given your role as a leader to sort of like guide people. Like that for me is like leaving people and not helping them to like move through something. So
Yeah. And we have seen that time and time again in our work as consultants.
yes, ma'am. People left.
Seriously. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. Let's wrap up and share what our key takeaways are. So, just thinking about what we discussed today, what are your final thoughts, Ani?
Final thoughts. One, the thing that's sitting with me is, your leadership style is developed from within. So you don't have to buy all the books or look to external archetypes. You can really get to know yourself deeply and really cultivate what leadership means to you. And I think the benefit of that is it one lends itself to you being extremely anchored, you having deep values, and two, it allows for your sort of like unique skills and strengths to be forward in whatever that leadership style is. And maybe it's not something that the world has experienced yet. So,
I love it. Yeah, I would say similarly that our leadership styles are not fixed, that they should evolve as we evolve, and that we need to give ourselves permission for our approach to leadership to change over time as we experience more and do more. So
that
find mentors and ask for feedback often so you can see how your approach is being perceived and landing with folks around you.
love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, folks, for listening today. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to leave us a review. It helps to boost our engagement. You can also share this podcast with peers or colleagues. And if you'd like to reach Ani and I directly, email us at the don't do that pod at gmail.com. And until next time, remember,
Don't
don't
do
do
that.
that.